Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. What is money? No, seriously, what is money? I know what you're thinking. Doug, it's the stuff in your wallet or in your bank that you can pay for things with. And that is true, but let's go a little deeper and ask, what does money represent? All money really is a placeholder for our time and skill. Think about this for a second. When you go to work, no matter what you do, you are paid based on your skill doing your job and the time that it takes to do it. We could just be on the barter system, and when we go out to a restaurant, pay with washing the dishes afterwards. That would be a trade of time and skill for that meal. But instead of doing that every time we want a burger or a romantic dinner with our spouse, we give them money instead. We give that money for their time and skill, making that burger and fries or tri-tip steak. They then take that money and pay the people that they owe for their time and skill. We got the money we paid for that meal from our employer, who paid us for our time and skill doing what we do. And on and on and on it goes, right? People getting paid for their time and skill with money. There is an exception to this. It's the government at tax time. Yeah, they're not working for the money we give them. We give them our money because we don't want people with guns coming around and throwing us in jail if we don't pay it. They just keep demanding more and more of our hard-earned money. But maybe that is the point. Liberal leftists don't see money the same way that you and I see it. Maybe they don't see it as our hard-earned money. An opinion piece by Ben Shapiro, I thought, really said it well when he said, yesterday, Tax Day, was the greatest American holiday, according to the Democratic Party. You might think of Tax Day as something annoying and awful. That day when you slip a check into the mail that represents a gigantic chunk of your yearly earnings, so the federal government can then spend all that money on a bunch of useless horse crap. But that's where you're wrong, according to the Democrats. For them, Tax Day is a magnificent delight, a day of festivities for all. We should look forward to it every year because taxes are incredible. As Joe Biden used to say, they are a sign of patriotism, of social solidarity. Or, in reality, sticking it to the people who earn money in the United States. There's something even better for Democrats spending all of that magical money on awful nonsense. In fact, that's the best part. It's not your money. It was never your money. It was always their money. They let you control some of it, but the rest of it they take from you, and then they burn it just to show you that their economic freedom belongs to them. The purpose of taxes, according to Democrats, is not a more prosperous society or an obliteration of poverty. The purpose of taxes is quite simple: to punish success. Of course, they always deny that they believe the more successful you are, the more you ought to be punished. One of the most seminal political debates I've ever covered, he says, was the 2008 Democratic debate involving then Senator Barack Obama. whose answer to a certain question would in any normal world have disqualified him for the presidency. The question was this: would you increase the capital gains tax rate even if it resulted in less tax revenue for the government to spend? Let me repeat that. Would you increase the capital gains tax rate even if it resulted in less tax revenue for the government to spend? Barack Obama said, "What I've said is that I would look at raising the capital gains tax for purposes of fairness." You understand? The purpose is fairness. That's the purpose of taxes. Fairness. Not prosperity, fairness. It is not more government revenue to use for, useful things. It is to punish people. It is fairness. No Democrat has ever been able to answer this question. What exactly represents a fair tax rate? When is it fair enough? If the normal person were to pay a 40% tax rate and Richie Rich over here were to pay 90% tax rate, would that be fair? If, in fact, everyone were to pay 100% tax rate, would that be fair? No Democrat can ever explain what the ideal fair tax rate is, because fair is a fungible term. Fair doesn't mean anything. Fair is in the eye of the beholder. The real key is that you are punishing and reveling in punishing the rich people. That's what it's about. That's why the Democratic Party on tax day put out a tweet saying, "Tax the rich." Not help the poor, tax the rich. That's all they care about, taxing the rich. The way you know that it's working is because you're making the rich poorer. This is why Zoran Mandami, the communist mayor of New York, was sitting on a stage the day before tax day with a gigantic backdrop reading, "Tax the rich," while he was speaking about how well all of this is working. This is what he stated. He said, "And so, for all the discussion of the imagined exodus that would take place were we to tax the wealthiest New Yorkers by the appropriate amount, I say imagined, because before I was mayor, I was a state legislator, and I was part of an effort to increase taxes on millionaires at that time. We were told the same thing then. And what we find now is that we have more millionaires today than we did at that time, even after having passed that tax." Well, the reason you have more millionaires in the city isn't because of taxes. It's because of economic growth, period. Mamdani on tax day decided it was time to announce the new pied-à-terre tax. The pied-à-terre tax is a tax on any home that is someone's second home, a home that they don't live in most of the year, that is worth more than $5 million. The sick glee with which he announces taxes has nothing to do with helping people. It has everything to do with punishing people. That is the glee. This is your smiling Jacobin. If you had a guillotine nearby and he had the capacity to use it, he most certainly would. He cut an ad, in fact, which should creep you out if you have half a brain and you've seen it. He cut an ad talking about how excited he is to tax people. Remember, most people think of tax day as a miserable day because you're giving a bunch of money that you earned to a bunch of people who did not earn that money just so they can spend it on random crap. But according to Mamdani, it's the best day because he, as a useless person for his entire adult life who got elected mayor of New York, finally gets to do the thing he wants to do: bring the rich low. This is what he said. Today we're taxing. I'm thrilled to announce a pied-à-terre tax, the first in New York's history. This is an annual fee on luxury properties worth more than $5 million, whose owners do not live full-time in the city, like for this penthouse. And he was pointing to this penthouse, which he was standing in front of. And he says, which hedge fund CEO Ken Griffin bought for $238 million. This pied-à-terre tax is specifically designed for the richest of the rich, those who store their wealth in New York City real estate, but who don't actually live here. But even so, they're able to reap the huge financial rewards of owning property in, dare I say, the greatest city in the world. And most of the time, these units are sitting empty since, again, they don't actually live here. This is a fundamentally unfair system that hurts working new owners. I don't know how many new owners are buying $238 million homes, but anyway, now it comes to an end. This tax will raise at least $500 million directly for the city. I have a question. What is unfair about Ken Griffin spending $1 bajillion for an apartment and then not spending time in the apartment? Do you really think that Mamdani would be fine with Ken Griffin if he lived in the apartment? And beyond that, doxing Ken Griffin's apartment is a terrible thing for the mayor of New York City to do. You notice they use if you've seen the video, they use this Succession music underneath, because all the people who are rich are just like the people in Succession, except they're not. He says, I know a lot of rich people. Some are like the people in Succession and many are not. I also know a lot of people who are not rich, and some of them are terrible and some of them are wonderful. The idea, I guess, that virtue inherently coordinates with the level of wealth is nuts. But it is what undergirds the level of hatred that Democrats have for the people who earn. All of this ignores that many people who are wealthy today were not so yesterday. I once had very little money in my bank account, he says. But that's the beautiful thing about America. It's pretty incredible. Yet, according to Democrats, that's a bad thing. It would be better if nobody had their money in their bank account. Zohran Mamdani believes that people who earn money in a capitalist society are worse human beings. And it is a nearly universal idea among top-tier Democrats as well. And I'll say, when we give our hard-earned money to the government, we expect that they will look after what they take from us and use it wisely. I mean, that's the contract we're supposed to have with our government, right? We, by virtue of being a citizen here, owe taxes for governmental purposes, and we expect them to use it wisely. But that is not the case. In fact, just recently, I mean, we've covered many of these on the podcast. Federal prosecutors have charged, in just like Minnesota, for instance, have charged over 90 people in schemes like Feeding Our Future. Remember that organization? Yeah. $250 million confirmed fraud from pandemic meals. They were supposed to be giving pandemic meals. $250 million worth. And others in Medicaid housing, funded housing, autism therapy. Remember that? I mean, autistic kids and things were supposed to get therapy. They weren't, because the dollars were going elsewhere. How about childcare? All this leading to at least 60 convictions. Confirmed fraud totals around $800 million to $1 billion across key programs, including $300 million from meals, $220 million in autism services, and $302 million in housing stabilization. Primarily, federal estimates suggest up to $9 billion, potentially fraudulent, out of $18 billion. We're talking half spent since 2018 across 14 programs. So you might think, well, there's people that must be getting in trouble, right, in Minnesota for this. Well, in the Feeding Our Future case, Abdul Abubakar Ali got 1 year and 1 day. That's a third of what the guidelines recommend. 1 year and 1 day for all those millions of dollars. Other defendants received 1 year probation or shorter terms. Some cases saw dismissals or overturned convictions, like, for instance, $7.2 million Medicaid fraud case, dismissed by a, of course, liberal judge. California, let's look at California, for instance, and the fraud happening there. California reports high fraud volumes with 473, 372 incidences. That's 1,200 out of every 100,000 people. That's crazy. That's the nation's highest total, spanning identity theft like EBT and CalWorks. Over $310 million stolen from 2022 to 2026. 52 charged since 2023, stealing over $4 million. And even healthcare. Recent healthcare cases include $267 million at least in Medi-Cal hospice kickback scheme. 21 people have been charged. And get this, out of those basically $270 million, only $30 million has been recovered. And other Medicare fraud takedowns as well. I mean, officials stopped $6 billion in tax fraud over 8 years amid federal scrutiny of the Medi-Cal oversight. So, hey, they're sentencing these guys to long sentences, right? Well, in the EBT CalWorks fraud, Alberto Barron, I guess is how you pronounce it, pleaded no contest to grand theft and enhancements for a $100K scam, a $100,000 scam. And he was indicted for 2 years prison despite up to 10 plus years potential. Another, Barago, got 10 months federal prison, the highest possible under the lightest possible under the guidelines. For EBT PIN fraud, he only had to pay back $18,000 restitution. Welfare fraud often results in fines, benefit loss, probation over prison for first offenses under the state law. I mean, they're just not holding these people accountable. Democrats are not holding people accountable for the fraud. What are they doing to stop it from happening in the state? Well, Fox News reports this as California Democrats are being ripped over a bill that one state assembly member has dubbed as the Stop Nick Shirley Act, which he argues would criminalize investigative journalism. The controversial bill, officially titled Privacy for Immigration Support Service Providers, creates privacy protections for immigration support service providers, employees, and volunteers, including hiding their addresses and imposing penalties on those who publish their image on social media. Democratic lawmakers say the legislation is needed to protect people from targeted political violence. Yeah, we see a lot of that, right? However, critics, including Republican Assembly member Carl DeMio, argue the bill would actually work to silence citizen journalists and shield taxpayer-funded organizations from public scrutiny, of course. The bill has already passed its early stages and currently sits in the California Assembly Judiciary Committee. If the bill is signed into law, the California Secretary of State will oversee a program that will conceal from the public records the addresses of any person who has provided, quote, designated immigration support services, unquote, including services like healthcare and legal assistance and case management if they had been subjected to threats, harassment, or violence stemming from their work. The California Secretary of State will assign participants a substitute address, which will be used by local and state agencies and will be tasked with forwarding mail to program participants' real addresses. The legislation also prohibits private citizens or businesses from posting the images, personal information, or home addresses of any program participant online or on social media if the intent is to threaten the Immigration Support Service worker or incite violence from a third party. A participant covered under the program could file a complaint in court against a person or organization that posts their image and could be awarded up to $4,000. Violators of the law could face additional criminal penalties, including $10,000 fine or up to 1 year in jail. So the bill's introduction follows investigations by independent journalists, including Shirley, that exposed alleged fraud schemes in the Democratic-controlled state. In March, Shirley published a video, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, which alleging $170 million in fraud was committed by registered hospice care and healthcare companies. Shirley visited various locations of the registered clinics, showing him interacting with the alleged fraudsters. And since the report went public, Vice President J.D. Vance, who also serves as the administration's fraud czar, announced the federal government has suspended 447 hospices and 23 home health agencies suspected of fraud in just Los Angeles. The total fraud estimated in those schemes is more than $600 million. So instead of trying to prevent our hard-earned money from being stolen, they're doing what they can to prevent anyone from uncovering the fraud. It's not, oh, hey, can we stop these dollars from going out to, fraud cases? No, it's, hey, how can we cover this up? Instead of trying to hold people accountable for stealing what should go to the things government should be doing, they instead try to hide what is happening to it. Instead of making sure that our money is spent wisely and people get the help and services promised, they punish those who find the fraud happening. So let's look at who is paying all those taxes. If you just look at the federal income tax, okay, the top 1% of income earners, those making about $663,000 or more, pay around 40% of all federal income taxes, while they only earn 22% of total income. The top 10%, okay, top 10%, which is 178,000 to that 663 mark, they cover 72%. The top 10% pay 72% of income taxes, while only earning 49% of the income. And if you say, well, what about the other half? Okay, because we're looking at the bottom 50%. Okay, well, they must be paying a lot, right? So those making 50,000 or under, that's the bottom 50%. They pay just 2% of the income taxes. Just 2%. That's it. That's all. 2%. So we get back to the original question, can we? What is the rich's fair share? I mean, literally, a fair income tax would be like a flat tax, right? Where everyone would just simply pay like 17% of what they earn, no matter how much they get in their paycheck. I mean, that is the most fair tax, isn't it? So why won't liberal leftists go for a flat tax? Because it's not about the money. If it was about the money, they would not let the fraud go on like it is. If it was about the money, they would make sure that our hard-earned cash would get to where they promised it will. It's not about the money because it's about control. That is what it's about. Why is it that our public school systems can get around $20,000 a year per student, pay teachers in some cases around $140,000 a year in salary and benefits, and then still cry and complain and walk out over funding levels? Because it's not about teaching kids. If it was, 2/3 of our kids would not be failing to read, write, and do math properly. Why can't government keep our roadways maintained and expand to keep traffic down? Because it's not about the money. It's about control and getting you out of your car because the traffic and the roads are too bad. You don't want to use it. It's about getting you to take government-funded transportation and not using those dirty, gas-guzzling cars. Those cars that give you independence and freedom of movement. They can't have that. So they raise the gas tax and the carbon tax and the road and the bridge tolls, and I can go on. You see, it's not about the money. It's about their control over you. Why is it that the government wants you to not have any kind of weapon, for instance? It's not about public safety. It's about control. If it was about public safety, they would encourage and more gun ownership, wouldn't they? No, they want a citizenry that can't defend themselves and are dependent on them for their safety. Look at Iran right now. The protesters can't do anything. They have no weapons. But they can use their bodies to demonstrate how bad the government is there. And that's why 42,000 people were killed in the months leading up to the war there. It's not about safety. It's about control. At the height of the former Soviet Union, the tax rate was an astonishing 90%. That means that everyone could only keep 10% of what they earned from their government job. And that seems like a fair tax, don't you think? I mean, everyone is paying the same 90%. Everyone was paying their fair share. So why did the USSR collapse and it no longer exists today? Because, like former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher once said, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. I like that quote. If we continue down this road of socialism, where we just keep raising the taxes on everyone in the name of fairness, we will eventually run out of other people's money. It collapses in on itself. So answer me this. Where has communism ever worked in the history of the world? I'll wait. Of course, the answer is it never has worked. If you ask a socialist today this very question, you know what they'll say? They say, well, yes, of course it's never worked because it has never been done correctly. Never been done correctly? That is ridiculous. And it's like saying that no one has ever jumped into a pool and stayed dry because they've never done it right. We just had tax day last week. And instead of lamenting about how many of our hard-earned tax dollars we had to give to the government, many were lamenting that we were not giving enough. They wanted us dependent on the government. They don't want us free to earn money on our own. They want control so that they have power over us, not us having power over our own government. This is why they hate a free market system of economics. This is why they hate capitalism with a passion. They say that they hate capitalism because people earning money are greedy, right? You hear that all the time. They're greedy. But isn't the truth that they are the ones that are greedy? They are the ones that take our money, don't protect it or spend it on promised services, and demand more. That seems a little greedy to me. Maybe our fair share is a lot less than what we are paying. So, what is a fair share to you? I would love to hear what you think about it. And of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Thank you very much for listening. This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.